Hi everyone, and welcome to Know Your Food with Wardee. I'm Wardee, a wife, mom of 3, and the lead teacher and founder of TraditionalCookingSchool.com. I'm also the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Fermenting Foods. I'm so glad you're here. This is the podcast devoted to healthy family cooking with traditional methods like sourdough and old-fashioned pickling. These foods are delicious, easy, healthy, and your family will love them. If you haven't already, be sure to grab my free gift for you. It's 5 free traditional cooking videos from inside Traditional Cooking School that will introduce you to my favorite fundamental techniques of traditional cooking. To start watching now, just go to knowyourfoodpodcast.com/watch. And now let's get to today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to Know Your Food with Wardee podcast. This is episode 165. So if you're joining us live, we don't yet have the show notes ready, but if you're watching this as a video replay or the podcast on Friday, on or after Friday, June 10th, I believe it's June 10th. Yes. Then the show notes will be ready for you and all the links and everything we mentioned, even the complete transcript at knowyourfoodpodcast.com/165. So we are live right now on Blab. So I just want to give a quick rundown of how Blab works before I introduce you to my guest, Melanie, and we get into the topic today. So how Blab works is if you're here live, you will have a live chat on the right-hand side. Feel free to make use of that. If you want to ask a question of Melanie or I, you do a /Q, and that'll put it into the question queue. And we will answer if it's relevant to what we're speaking about, or we'll save questions for the end. On the left-hand side of your screen is where you can share. So you can share the last 30 seconds of what's been going on to Facebook or Twitter and just let people know what's going on, because if you have friends or family who are need or interested in gut healing, we appreciate you sharing. And finally, Melanie and I would dearly love your participation and applause where appropriate. So chime in on the chat, but also where you see each of our faces in the bottom right corner, there's 2 hands side by side, thumbs together. And if you just click there, and you can click multiple times, if you like what's being said, like I'm doing to Melanie right now, I'm giving her applause. So feel free to do the props. Blab calls it props. So welcome to everyone. Welcome to those that are live and the replay and podcast listeners later. And this is going to be a great podcast/web class today. So I'm going to tell you about Melanie now. Melanie's my guest that you can see up here too if you're watching the video. She's a nutritional therapy practitioner, and she's a certified GAPS practitioner in Vermont. She's been trained by the creator of the GAPS diet, Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, and she's had further training in functional nutrition as well. She has a passion for helping families in the area of digestive therapy, and she's known for making digestive therapy understandable and for supporting families in that endeavor. She has 4 children of her own, so she's well-versed in children and navigating these waters, and she has a great desire to help other families follow this path of nourishment with a focus on gut health, and very, very practical. So welcome, Melanie. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Wardee. That was a great introduction. Thanks.
Well, you deserve it, and I'm just so thrilled you're here to share. And I should say you are taking time out of attending a conference right now, so we are especially blessed that you're taking this time with us. So I gave kind of the bio that anybody could read on your site, really, and as they get to know you. But I'm hoping that you'll take a few minutes and tell us more about you and your family and kind of your life and some special things about you.
Okay. Well, as you said, I'm mom to 4, and I like to say I'm mom to 4 hungry eaters. And I'm wife to a great guy who we've been together 19 years. We were childhood sweethearts. So we're celebrating our 19th anniversary this summer. So my 4 kids, thank you. That's a feat. 4 kids. So my oldest is Cade, who's 16. Then there's Jack, who's 13, Maggie, who's 11, and Charlotte, who's 9. They're all blonde.
Oh,
yeah. So we live in the Green Mountains of Vermont, where the people are of a very decent sort, and local food is plentiful and easy to come by. And there's plenty of, mountain ponds and rivers to swim in and cross-country skiing in the wintertime.
I see your pictures on Facebook often, and I just think you live the perfect life.
Well, there are definitely some very good pieces to it.
Yeah, as it is with all of us. I mean, we all have blessings and we have challenges, and we're going to talk about some of those challenges today and how you can make them easier.
Yep. So that's kind of the synopsis of my little family, or big family, depending on how you look at it.
I love that. My husband and I are on our 20th year as well. Well,
wow.
We just hit 19 in December, so we're about to hit 20. And like you said, it's quite amazing to have built a life of so many years, so many rich blessings, and hard work.
Very, yep.
Well, let's get into your health story and what brought you specifically into the realm of gut health and nutrition.
Yeah. So I spoke of those 4 hungry eaters. Having babies takes a large draw on the bank of maternal health. And by the time number 4 came around, my maternal bank account was kind of in the red. And through a series of postpartum events, my health kind of spiraled and set off my own health crisis. Migraines, eczema, thrush, and thrush. When I say thrush, I'm talking about 5 months of excruciating nursing, like crying whenever she latched on, that kind of thrush. Systemic candida, acne, fatigue, anxiety, just general aches and pains, that sort of thing. So I tried real food diets, the candida diet. I tried natural remedies like herbs and different supplements, which moved the needle enough, but was not, it moved the needle enough to encourage me, but it was not enough to deal with all of my issues. Yeah. So in the midst of my struggles, I found Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, who is this neurologist from the UK who has this amazing wealth of medical knowledge paired with this wonderful traditional Russian wisdom. And she had, I was able to hear her speak at a Weston Price conference when I was nursing my 4th. And she spoke about the gut and psychology syndrome protocol. And it just, all the connections and synapses fired in my brain, you know, how when given the proper tools, our bodies can, that they want to heal themselves. They want to take care of us and support us, but they need the right tools. And often that's going back to traditional ways, but in a structured healing protocol. So I needed a protocol that went deeper. I found Dr. Natasha, I found GAPS. She designed the GAPS protocol out of her own need when her small son was diagnosed with autism. And she was able to heal him and then go on to use it in her clinic with hundreds, thousands of families. And she found that by focusing on this digestive protocol, she not only helped children, but the families of the children who were doing the protocol with their kids. So she found that it just helped a myriad of issues along with the autistic children.
When you hear typing, it's because you have so many little perfect quotes here. I'm sharing them on Twitter and Facebook. It's just so wonderful to hear your story. I have heard her speak as well when I attended Wise Traditions in 2011, and it was the most memorable presentation. I think it was her knowledge combined with her heart.
Yes. Yeah.
You could just tell she is a doctor that has lived it, cared it, loved it, and puts 100% into
they're
continuing to help.
Absolutely. She's had to actually step back a few times for her own health because she's so passionate about her work.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and how you got on this path. So let's talk now about what you do, because you had your own health challenges, and the GAPS diet protocol was what moved the needle significantly for you and your family. And now you are, I guess you could say, following in Dr. Natasha's footsteps, because you've been trained by her and now you're helping children and families yourself. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the work that you do now.
Yeah, minus the neurologist part.
Yeah.
So I'm trained as a nutritional therapy practitioner, as you said before, or NTP for short, and as a certified GAPS practitioner, with further certification in a functional nutrition training by Restorative Wellness Solutions. What that all means is that I can help moms, kids, and individuals to sort out their health in a very foundational way, crafting a GAPS plan that's very bio-individual, and using targeted lab tests to work efficiently and specifically to each individual's needs or their body's needs. And also take their lifestyle into consideration. It's kind of, you need to factor in not just the food, but what's going on in their life, what food sensitivities they have that could be causing inflammation. They could be the very GAPS foods that they're eating every day. So we test for that. We want to know what's going on in their digestive tract that we could help kind of move along quicker. So I'm able to very effectively help even some of the, the tougher cases, which a lot of GAPS cases end up being.
Right. That's what I've noticed, is everyone is just a slight bit different. And that difference is so crucial to getting over the hump to healing.
Yeah.
Because it can really hold you back. So without divulging like private client information, could you give us a simple example of like maybe something that you've run into that you've discovered through testing that then you were able to craft a more personalized plan?
So right off the top of my head, just in this year, I was working with a little boy who was put on the GAPS protocol. He was dealing with, from the time he was very little, the constant vomiting and refluxing. And within a very short period of time on GAPS, that completely stopped. And he'd been dealing with that since the time he was very little. But he continued to deal with some other issues like tummy pain. And through the food sensitivity testing that I do, we were able to completely eliminate that and get his digestion working well and kind of hammer out the rest of his health details. So that's just a quick example right off the top of my head. So
great.
We're able to, within GAPS, you're eating especially on GAPS intro, you're eating some pretty specific foods. And let's, for example, say you have a sensitivity to chicken and cabbage, and you are making chicken broth every day or eating sauerkraut or sauerkraut juice every day, and you're sensitive to those two foods, you're going to slow down or even halt your your healing process. So just by eliminating those and moving to like beef or venison or lamb or turkey, and choosing some other vegetables to ferment, then you're able to kind of speed that healing process up.
Yeah.
Not have the daily inflammation from those problematic foods.
Yeah, because it's not a one size fits all. We have these classes of healing foods, but some people are allergic. Like some people are sensitive to most protein, and so they have to find the one that they can eat.
Safe.
The one safe protein. Yeah. That's wonderful.
So that's my one work, and then I've had the privilege of bringing over 200 families through my online GAPS classes. That's a real treat to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, because that's what it's about. It's about helping children and families. Well, let's back up because we've been talking about GAPS, which is a particular gut healing protocol, and it's the one that worked for you to significantly move the needle with your issues. It's also the one that you teach and you help families. How can someone know whether they really need GAPS at all? Because I know there's a lot of people in our community, in the traditional cooking school community, they're like, well, I'm not at my best. I get this question all the time. Do I need to do GAPS, or can I just do traditional cooking, traditional food? So can you help us sort that out?
Well, just to kind of give an example from my own story, I started with traditional foods and made some good movement. It didn't quite do what I needed it to do. So I would say that anyone who's unwell can do well with full GAPS. That's kind of tailored to them. Now, the specific reasons to do the GAPS introduction diet, I'm going to just read from my notes because there's about 6 or so points. So if you have diarrhea of any origin, abdominal pain, bloating, flatulence, that kind of thing, those real digestive issues. If you have leaky gut and inflammatory bowel conditions, autistic children and all children on the spectrum, or with learning disabilities like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, those are kids who should be doing GAPS intro. Kids and adults diagnosed with diabetes type 1 or celiac disease. These people have serious damage to their gut lining and it needs slow and methodical healing. Some cases of stubborn constipation, but I'll talk more about that in the full GAPS. And then multiple food allergies and intolerances, as in those cases, the gut lining is really damaged. And again, that needs that slow healing. So those are the people groups that GAPS introduction is really meant for. And then one more, I guess, if you have health issues that aren't resolving on full GAPS, if you've tried full GAPS and they're not resolving, then it would be time to try intro. Excuse me.
I'm just leaving a link in the comments. Roxanne is asking where she can get more info. So I linked her to your 30-day prep guide. And coming up here, Roxanne, we're going to talk about Melanie's GAPS class. I'll give you a link to that right now if you want to check it out while we're talking. Okay. Did you have anything else to add there? Did you get through all your 6?
Yes.
List of 6? Okay, great. So that was really helpful. I like that. I like that you pulled out very specific conditions or symptoms that people are experiencing where, like you pointed out, the traditional food will get you a little bit, but you need more. And that's where GAPS comes in. So that's wonderful. Okay, well, now let's get to the promise of today's web class, because you're very good at simplifying GAPS from the 30-day prep guide that you have for free at your site, which, by the way, anybody can get at tradcookschool.com/30-day prep guide. I just put a link in the chat. It'll also be at the show notes, knowyourfoodpodcast.com/165, and also through your GAPS class. We'll talk about that in a bit too. But you're here on this web class, and you've promised to give us some tips for, this is not a word, for unoverwhelmingizing, for making gaps. Bless you. Do you need to take a moment to have a drink? Yeah. Yeah. So how can we make gaps simpler? It can be overwhelming. The things that come to my mind are people thinking they're have to be a slave to the broth making. They don't have time for anything else. They don't even have enough time. They're faced with family members that are like, I'm so sick of eating cooked veggies and broth, and I'm not going to eat anything else ever again because now I hate eating. Or just I can't wrap my head around all the different stages of intro and what I can introduce when. So talk us through how to just demystify that and make it simpler because you have led 200 families now through your GAPS class. You've made it simple for them. So let's do it here.
Okay, so let's start with talking about the main components of GAPS.
Okay.
So there's three main components, that being the diet, which is further broken down into the introduction diet, the full diet, and transitioning off of GAPS. And then the second component is supplementation, and the third is detoxification.
Okay.
So I'm going to focus on the diet component, and more specifically, the introduction diet.
We'll continue with talking about how to simplify GAPS, how to make it not overwhelming.
Okay. So back to the overview, what the GAPS protocol does. It treats the root issue, which is the gut. And it does this by gently cleaning up, removing the flow of toxins. It removes hard to digest foods, and it corrects nutritional deficiencies by emphasizing healing foods, which in turn restores your immune system.
That's a great summary.
Great, thanks. So the diet component, as I said before, it's made of the 6-stage introduction diet, the full GAPS diet, and the transitioning off of GAPS eventually. Yes. As a whole, the nutritional protocol of GAPS lasts for 1.5 to 2 years. We're ready to start adding in some transition foods when we've been about 6 months with no symptoms.
Okay.
So that's when we start talking transition foods that we haven't been able to eat for a while.
I like that. I've never heard anybody say that as a rule, but what a great thing to go by.
So we're talking that's done in a very structured way and very slowly. But if you've been without any digestive symptoms or symptoms that are unique to you for about 6 months, then you can start adding in like new potatoes and fermented buckwheat, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But for most, that's at least a year and a half. But for families like ours who are not coming in with issues like autism, that could be a shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Sure does.
So, good. So the next thing I want to talk about is what the GAPS introduction diet does. It provides building blocks for the kind of little baby cells in our digestive tract, the enterocytes. It's very gentle and healing because it's low fiber. And it introduces those gentle foods gradually, starting with the very gentlest first. And it also provides beneficial microbes. And you could call it a holistic approach for diarrhea, to put it in kind of basic terms.
I love that.
Yeah. So I like to approach the introduction diet with 3 different time frames. I call it my 3 measured approaches to starting GAPS with your family. So approach number one is what's called the 3 to 6 month approach. That's best if you're starting from ground zero, eating a standard American diet. You don't know much about real food. Maybe you're just discovering Wardee's site and traditional cooking. There's still a lot of processed food in your diet, and you found out about GAPS, but you are completely overwhelmed and you need to educate yourself. So in the 3 to 6 month approach, the first thing you want to do is transition to real food. And you might take a month to just remove processed foods and to learn how to replace them with more traditional home versions. When you're searching for new recipes, you could use search terms like paleo or primal or real food or grain-free, and just get used to that kind of cooking. The second step would be to remove sugar and grains. And then the next step would be to move to full GAPS. And here's how I would recommend doing that. I would take a month where in the first week you are doing all of your breakfasts full GAPS. And then maybe the second week you're doing all of your snacks full GAPS plus the breakfast. And then week 3, you're adding in GAPS lunches. And then week 4, you're adding in GAPS dinners. So that by the end of that month, you are on full GAPS.
So what you've done is you've taken somebody from standard American diet to
full GAPS,
cleaning up the diet so it's whole food traditional. And then you've started removing some of the foods that are not included on full GAPS so that by the end of that time, they've kind of very simply transitioned to full GAPS. So the removal of grains, sugars, processed foods, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
And then once you're fully transitioned to full GAPS, you've got your cooking skills are in hand, and you're familiar with the skills that are needed. Then I recommend doing the 6 stages of intro in reverse, actually. Before then doing them in the order they are meant to be done. And then when you're finally done with the 6 stages of intro, then transition to full GAPS. Now that's the long view approach, the 3 to 6 months. Wherein you plan tasks on your calendar by the week, gathering your sources, learning your skills, finding your recipes, that sort of thing.
And you go through a lot of these things in your 30-day prep guide, correct?
A lot of the skills, yep.
Okay.
And I've got plenty of recipes on the site.
I'll just want to direct people to that. So if you go to tradcookschool.com/30-day prep guide, you'll be on Melanie's site. She's at Honest Body. You can sign up. It's fairly obvious where to sign up to receive that prep guide. You could also explore her recipes. And that's where she walks you through some of these transition steps of gathering supplies, equipment, learning the techniques that you will need to do the GAPS diet.
Yep. There's also a handy little 5-day downloadable menu and checklist for the first 5 days of GAPS intro.
I saw that.
Which can be the roughest 5 days.
Just
of
being
the
honest.
Introduction diet. Just being honest. Yep.
Totally
worth it. Totally worth it.
Totally worth it.
So my second approach is the 1 month approach. That's best for the family or the individual who has a good understanding of real and traditional food.
Okay.
They're ready to take their health to the next level, but they still want to and can afford to take a more measured approach. So what that looks like is you're planning your tasks on your calendar by the day.
Okay.
But you're taking, again, you're doing that 1 month trying GAPS foods and, using the 30-day prep guide skills. And week by week, you're adding in one GAPS meal per day. So first week, breakfast, second week, lunches, third week, snacks, fourth week, full gaps. And then you start the 6 stages of GAPS intro as is normally laid out.
I like that.
So that's kind of my 1 month approach. And the reason I'm giving timeframes is that it's so helpful to put it on the calendar and schedule it and then work backwards from there. In our own family, we, just a little side note here, we actually
we love side notes.
We did GAPS while traveling in an Airstream around the western half of the country. And, in a moment of life is what you make of it, we set a date when we were going to start GAPS and just went for it.
So if you can do that, anybody can. This is
if it can be done,
normal way is way easier.
if it can be done in an RV kitchen, it can be done.
That's great.
Lastly, as far as approaches, I do have what's called the next week approach.
This is like the cold turkey approach?
Yes, the cold turkey approach. But there are circumstances where that's needed. So if you have severe digestive issues, children with autism, children who are in daily pain and distress, their tummies hurt no matter what they eat, they're doubled over and self-harming because they're in pain, that kind of situation.
Or wasting away.
Like these kids need nutrients and they need them now. So in this case, you don't have the luxury of a measured approach. Or, if you just happen to like the cold turkey approach. So in that case, I recommend clearing your calendar, a long weekend at least. Okay. Removing some of those social obligations. I would say 5 days off of school or work is best. Some special needs kids need longer, of course. I would suggest using the 5 days intro checklist and menu that's on my site and make a grocery list. Order the Heal Your Gut cookbook, which is an awesome cookbook that's just been available in the last couple years. It has all 6 stages of intro with recipes for each stage, plus lots of amazing full GAPS recipes. You need to prep 1 day ahead of yourself. And I would caution to not run out of food. It's really important when you're dealing with, detoxing and brain fog and just, all those sorts of issues. You want to have food prepped ahead of yourself. So that would be my next week approach.
So we've had the 3 to 6 months, the 1 month, and the next week approach. And they're all possible ways for people to really get into GAPS very simply and not overwhelming. Yep. And they also suit kind of the type of family you are, where you are. Like the 3 to 6 months is the family who's standard American diet. The 1 month approach is the family who's well-versed with traditional methods and knows how to make stock and simple ferments and has the equipment and ingredients already kind of down, so they can transition easily into just, a little more restricted, but they already know how to do everything.
Yep.
And then there's the next week, because the person or a family member just really needs the protocol right now.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I love how you broke that down. Love it.
So now I'd like to talk about some basic GAPS intro tips.
Okay.
So my first kind of tip is about food sourcing, which is something really near and dear to my heart. This is an involved conversation that we talk about a lot in the GAPS class. We just wrapped up a GAPS grocery list challenge
Fun.
wherein we talked about all the main foods of GAPS and where to source them, regardless of where you are. So I like to recommend that you get to know your local farmers, that you spend a day evaluating your budget and pricing out your local sources. You may say, what if I live in a food desert? That is a very possible thing in different parts of this country. So there are some online resources. There's an Amish food membership called Miller's Organics, and they ship all around the country. And it's a lot of GAPS friendly foods. There's, the broth, the sauerkrauts, the 24-hour yogurts and kefirs. So I believe you can just Google that and find it. But there's also localharvest.org, eatwild.com, pickyourown.org, localfarmmarkets.org. And then for more pantry type items, there's thrivemarket.com.
Great. I'll have all of these links in our show notes, everyone. knowyourfoodpodcast.com/165. That'll be available on Friday, June 10th, if you're listening, to the live recording.
Great. And then a special note that's been added in recent years to the introduction diet is that for the first 30 days, we're doing meat stock instead of bone broth. Meat stock has less histamines, less glutamine. When there's a leaky gut, there's very likely a leaky blood-brain barrier, and a strong, hearty bone broth can cause issues at first. Mm-hmm. So chicken stock is especially gentle for intro. The difference between meat stock and bone broth is that meat stock is made by boiling a cut of meat on the bone. Like, for instance, if you took a whole chicken or a bone-in roast and you cook that in water for a short period of time, say 1.5 to 2 hours, whereas bone broth is made with all kinds of bones for a really long simmering time.
Yes.
Up 2 to 48 hours. So meat stock is easier and gentler in the beginning of intro. Mm-hmm. And we do that for 30 days. And it's really, it's easier to make, as you can just throw your chicken in the pot with some, carrots and onions and garlic and whatnot. And then, hour and a half later, you've got your cooked chicken and you've got your meat stock, and that's, dinner. You're everything in one pot. Right.
And it's not so much different as making chicken soup. Right. So
right.
It works no matter what.
Yes.
You already know how to do that.
You do. So to speed up your healing, there are some foods to focus on. And those being bone marrow, the gelatinous soft tissues around the bones, the skin, etc. And I'll tell you a use for that in a minute. Animal fats and organ meats. So those are the 4 foods that, if possible, they need to be consumed as often as possible. They provide some of the best healing for the gut lining. They're the kind of nuts and bolts of what goes into making a healthy gut lining. So how we did this as a family, I would cook a whole chicken, and then I would collect all of the soft tissues, the skin, the fat, etc., the little connective tissues, and I would combine them in a blender with salt and pepper, and this made a creamy pate that could be added to our soups and stews for extra flavor and all of those reparative nutrients. Great.
It also thickens it up. It just it really is delicious.
It's like a cream replacement. So tips for being smart in the kitchen. I recommend making 2 meals from every one that you're making. Plan 20.
Good advice.
Yes. Anyone. Yep.
Who has to cook.
Yep. Plan 24 hours in advance for every meal. So Monday morning, you're thinking about Tuesday morning's breakfast, and
Yep.
Monday night, you're thinking about Tuesday night's dinner. It's a great idea to chop a week's worth of veggies at a time and freeze them. That's a huge time saver on intro.
Yeah, so you're talking like carrots, onions,
squash, onions, broccoli, cauliflower. All of that can be chopped and frozen ahead of time.
Great.
Yeah. If you don't live in the deep south where it's, well, even if you do live in a warm part of the country, if you keep one pot of soup on your stove, and if you're home, you can reheat that throughout the day and not deal with multiple, pulling out containers, heating up, then putting them back into the fridge. This is what can be done unless you have histamine issues where you need to have your food as fresh as possible. I really can't stress enough that when you have detox brain and you're feeling, foggy headed, you don't want to make it worse by going hungry. And so if you keep food prepared and on hand, and most of the gaps into your foods can be prepared ahead of time. You can stock up on ghee, meats and bones, frozen veggies, animal fats and butter to make that ghee, 24-hour yogurt and kefir, quarts of sauerkraut. They all keep.
Yep, they do.
So,
yeah,
a lot of
great
that
advice.
Prepared ahead of time. The basic foods to have on hand.
Oh, this is going to be good.
So let's see, we've got about 8 foods here that.
Okay.
A variety of meat and meaty bones and fish. Fats, such as tallow, lard, ghee, duck fat. I love duck fat. Yogurt and kefir that are 24 hours.
Yes.
They need to be cultured for 24 hours or more. And there is a commercial brand of 24-hour cultured yogurt.
Oh.
It's by White Mountain, and it's coming to more and more health food stores.
Fantastic.
Just to put that note in there. Prepared meat stock, sauerkraut, vegetables, eggs, and virgin olive oil. Those are the basic foods to have on hand.
Great list.
Basic supplements to have on hand. And these first 2 aren't technically supplements, but they kind of act as supplements digestively. Lemon water in the morning, and ginger tea. And then the real supplements, a probiotic like BioCult or Gut Pro, cod liver oil, the most unprocessed and high quality you can get. Hydrochloric acid, which is the same acid that you have that your own stomach cells secrete, and almost everyone, I would say every one of my clients needs some hydrochloric acid at some point. It's just a basic. One of the very first north to south digestive needs is good stomach acid expression, which breaks down our protein, chelates our minerals, sanitizes our food. It has so many functions, and it sets up the rest of digestive to work properly. Magnesium glycinate could be helpful for constipation, and then essential fatty acid supplements like borage or black currant seed oil, fish oil, that sort of thing. In general, we take a break from all supplements on intro. And then in stage 3, we're adding in the probiotics and the cod liver oil. In stage 4, we're adding in the other essential fatty acid supplements. But there are 2 exceptions. If you're on prescriptions that need to be weaned off under a practitioner's care, and The other exception is if digestive help is needed during intro, wherein you would use things like hydrochloric acid. So let me get into the basic equipment.
Okay.
So if you're on a budget, here's your list. The most basic equipment, and most of us have this already in our kitchens. You need a stock pot and a good pan. I like cast iron and stainless steel. You need good knives and cutting boards. It's really helpful to have at least an inexpensive juicer. Like you can pick up a Jack LaLanne juicer for less than $50 usually from Craigslist. I'll get into my recommendations for like a better juicer when I talk about the more bonus fun equipment. Stick blender, like the Cuisinart Smart Stick, you can pick that up for like $35. And then mason jars of assorted sizes.
Yeah, so the family that's already traditional cooking
has all those.
Probably has all of maybe not the juicer. But,
maybe not. Yep.
But yeah.
So the bonus equipment, if you have the budget, you want to make food more fun, more gourmet sometimes, or more easier. So I recommend, my personal favorite for a juicer is the Omega J8006. There are other comparable or better juicers. That's kind of my family favorite. A Vitamix or a Blendtec blender, something high powered. I really like the Excalibur dehydrators. You can do your 24-hour yogurt in it. You can, dehydrate fruits and vegetables for snacks during your whole GAPS experience. You have a jerky recipe, don't you?
Yeah.
In the
Jerky's
dehydrator?
great.
Yep. Stand mixer, like a KitchenAid, is really useful for making, GAPS baked goods or making Russian custards, which are actually a stage 2 legal dessert to be used judiciously.
Is that a recipe on your site?
It is actually, yep.
Okay, so when you guys are grabbing the 30-day prep guide, chadcookschool.com/30-day prep guide, you just search for Russian custard. Okay, I'll try to get a link to it at the show notes. knowyourfoodpodcast.com/165. That's
a recipe that comes from Dr. Natasha's book. It's about as simple as you can get. It's whipped egg yolks and honey.
Sounds delicious.
It is. An instant pot's helpful for quicker cooking. A food processor like Cuisinart is wonderful to have. And then if you have some of the more serious issues, or histamine issues or methylation issues, it's helpful to have airlock fermenting vessels like the Piclet or the Probatic jar to have a cleaner ferment. And if you are fermenting long enough, then there are less histamines to deal with. So that's kind of my bonus equipment list. It's common to deal with either stubborn constipation or diarrhea on intro. So in the case of stubborn constipation, some tips are to either add in fresh pressed carrot juice early in stage 2 and take that with your cod liver oil, or to try an enema if you've not had a bowel movement in 2 days and nothing else is working. In my GAPS class, I have a whole menu of constipation remedies. For diarrhea, we recommend that you stay put on the current stage you're at. And if it's, kind of profuse and watery, then we even need to eliminate veggies until that clears up. You can also introduce the probiotic Biocult, which has been well tested for diarrhea.
Okay.
So those are kind of my basic tips.
Those were fantastic. I want to remind everyone that at the show notes that will be up on Friday, June 10th, we'll have a complete transcript that I know you're going to want to copy and paste to Evernote or wherever you keep your notes, because if you go on GAPS, these are so valuable. The basic equipment, basic supplements, basic pantry list. Then there's these special conditions of constipation or diarrhea. And Melanie's got a wealth of just really simple ways to, proceed. So anyway, show notes are going to be ready for you.
In regards to proceeding, I just want to give a couple tips on moving through intro, because a lot of people are confused by how to move through the 6 stages of intro. Yeah. So stage 1 is generally 1 to 2 days, unless you're dealing with diarrhea, and you stay put until the diarrhea clears up. Stages 2 to 4, we're taking about 4 to 7 days for each of those stages. Now, however, if you have a whole plethora of sensitivities, or you're one of the more severe cases, like the kind requiring that you start GAPS next week, then I usually suggest 1 new food every 3rd day for stages 2 to 4. Now, stages 5, we're adding in local and seasonal veggies, raw, that is. So when you're talking about vegetables, there's, endless amounts of vegetables you could be adding in. So what I recommend is that you stick to what is seasonal to you and work through those one by one. And the same for stage 6, where you're adding in more fruits. So stick to what's seasonal. That'll shrink your list of foods to work through. So you're not, overwhelmed with what you can eat and
maybe spending too long on it.
Yeah, still taking a careful approach. 1 new food at a time. That's
a great tip.
So I mentioned this before, but if you are on a stage, here's my kind of flow chart for how to decide when to move on. Say you're on intro stage 1. If you do have diarrhea, you stay put. Consider the no veggies, consider the BioCult. If not, move to stage 2. Now, in terms of adding in new foods, if you have a food that you're kind of wondering about adding in or not, then what's recommended is to do the skin sensitivity test. So say you want to try egg yolk on stage 2. So the night before you want to try that food, you put a drop of it on the inside of your wrist. If it's a dry food, you can add a little water, make a mash, put it on your skin. This is a simple at-home free test. There's more expensive lab tests that I do with clients, but this is simple free stuff at home. So you would put a drop of egg yolk on the inside of your wrist, go to bed. In the morning, if there's kind of an irritated red rash or something like that, then you would not add in that food at that time. You would move on to the next food and keep increasing what's already tolerated. So that's basically how we approach adding in new foods as we move through the stages. You don't have to halt at a stage until you can eat all of the foods in that stage. You can keep moving on and just skip over the problematic foods and try them again later.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know so many people wonder, if I can't have this one, do I have to stay here, or can I move on to something else? So that's good. A lot of freedom and possibilities there.
Yeah.
Great.
My next thing I'd like to talk about, if we have time, I see we're coming up on 3 o'clock Eastern.
I know. This has been amazing. You're sharing amazing information. Sure. How about one more point, and then I want to be sure to address, talk a little bit about your GAPS class, because I know that people are going to be interested in maybe some more hand-holding.
So I have kind of scripts that I have for people who want to get an idea of how to talk to their kids about GAPS. So if I could, I've got a script that is for younger kids. Okay. And then my 16-year-old son, Cade, actually shared a piece for teenagers. So if I may, I'll just read those.
Oh, I think this is fantastic.
I'll try to read somewhat slow if folks want to take notes, or
it'll
be in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes, word for word. So great. Just read it at conversational.
Okay. So for little kids or younger kids, your body has lots of little helpers, tiny bugs inside, but your body can also get too many unhelpful bugs, or insert whatever word appropriate for your child. These unhelpful bugs don't help us to be strong and healthy, so we need to tell them to move out and let the good bugs thrive. And we do this by taking away the unhelpful bugs' favorite foods, like sugar and junk food. And for a while, we eat only food that feeds the good bugs and makes them stronger so that they can do their jobs. This diet can also help us by repairing our tummies, building our muscles and our bones, and helping our brains work better. It really helps all the parts of us. For a little while, though, while the unhelpful bugs are dying off, we can feel yucky, and we might miss the foods that made those unhelpful bugs happy. We can't avoid that part, but I will help you as much as I can while they move out. We'll take special baths, we'll get fresh air and sunshine, watch some movies and read books, or insert favorite activities. It's good to reward with experiences rather than food.
Sure.
I also find it helpful to show the kids the stages and read to them what they can eat on each stage. And then they can, then that makes the list the guide rather than you, and kind of makes the list the heavy rather than you.
Right. Good point.
So, and they can help menu plan from that as well. Mm-hmm. So my 16-year-old son, Cade's take on GAPS, he says, "It sucks sometimes. Your friends will make fun of you. It's not a miracle that's going to fix you tomorrow. But if you ever want to feel good, if there was ever something that could benefit you more than exercise, more than just eating a few more vegetables a day, or avoiding that tasty box of cereal manufactured in some lab, it's hard, but if you really want my opinion, it's worth it." And anecdotally, if your teenagers have athletic goals, GAPS can help them stay really healthy, be less prone to injuries, and promote strong bones. And I can attest to that in my own kids.
Fantastic. Sure. I hope you thank your son, Cade, for sharing.
I did.
That was a really good approach from him. And I think it's great. It's coming from another teenager. It's real. Yeah, I mean, it's just what they think about. So great.
Yep. Unscripted.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the wealth of tips on simplifying GAPS. We covered a lot of ground. It was very simple lists you shared. So everyone who's listening now or later, the show notes are knowyourfoodpodcast.com/165. Those will be up on Friday, June 10th. So be sure to come by, because the sources of ingredients are foods. The equipment list will have lots of links, and you could even just cut and paste to wherever you want to save your document. And if you're listening and want to switch to video, or if you're on video and want to switch to the audio version, so you could, listen while you're doing dishes or walking, that's all there for you as well. So we're going to wrap up now with Melanie sharing about her GAPS class, which she holds. I'm not sure how many times a year, but it is currently open. So talk to us for a few minutes about what it is, how it works, and the link to it, everyone, is tradcookschool.com/GAPS class, one word.
Okay.
All right, take it away, Melanie.
Yeah, so it's a 10-week class that we run 2 to 3 times a year, depending on the year. And it's 10 weeks wherein you get a different module delivered to you every Monday. And then what many consider the best part of the class, besides the great materials and resources, is you get 4 hours a week of Q&A access to GAPS practitioner, that being myself and Jennifer Scribner, who I'm partnering with for this GAPS class. You get to ask your questions 24 hours a day, whenever suits you on the forum, and then we answer them during what I call office hours. And for this round, that's going to be Wednesday mornings, 9 to 11 Eastern, and then Friday afternoons, 2 to 4 Eastern time. And if we have time, I'll just briefly touch on what's in the modules.
I think that would be good to briefly list the 10 modules so people know.
Yep. So module 1 is dealing with both the organization of the course and the kind of the organization and structure of the gut and digestion. Module 2, we're talking about the psychological symptoms of GAPS, how the gut is connected to the brain and the more neurological issues. And the food focus of that module is meat stock and broth, how to make them, how to use them. By the way, we have cooking videos for all the main GAPS foods as well, included in the GAPS class. Module 3 deals with the physical symptoms of GAPS and how the gut health is connected to the rest of our body. For instance, chronic cystitis or asthma or eczema. And we have a food focus in that module of ghee, how to make it, how to use it. Module 4 is a heavy one. We talk about the nutritional protocol, all the parts and pieces of GAPS. We also talk about fermenting, anaerobic fermenting, probiotics. So it's a big one. And we talk about dairy introduction with a food focus on sauerkraut and sauerkraut juice.
Okay.
Module 5 talks about full GAPS, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack ideas, food lists, school lunch menus, eating with other people, traveling, everything.
Very practical.
Yes, very practical. And then the module 6 deals with the 6 stages of the GAPS introduction diet, with menu ideas for each stage, recipes for each stage, the 5 days of intro, menu, and checklist. And the food focus for module 6 is crispy nuts and nut butter. In module 7, we talk about supplementation, the basic GAP supplements plus additional complementary supplements like homeopathics. There's a bonus workbook in that module that's put together by a doctor of homeopathy that works with a lot of autistic children and GAPS kids. And then in module 8, we talk about GAPS detoxification, kind of the how-tos and the resources, the different types of detoxification that are used in the GAPS protocol. And our food focus is GAPS yogurt and sour cream.
Okay.
Module 9 covers more practical matters, kind of typical situations that come up and natural remedies for them. And there's a bonus workbook on budgeting in that module. And then module 10 deals with GAPS pregnancy and new baby, how to do GAPS when pregnant, tips for the best start for your baby, with bonuses on postpartum depression and menus and recipes for GAPS pregnancy. There's a couple of bonus modules on the heart diet hypothesis, heart disease, animal fats versus vegetable fats, cholesterol, that sort of thing. Those are kind of extra bonuses.
Wow. It's impressive. It's really impressive. Congratulations. I know you've been working on it for a couple of years. I mean, you've offered it several times. It just seems like it keeps getting better. And this time you have a partner practitioner, so you have more videos and more recipes. I'm just so thrilled you're making this available to children and families.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to do this work and to run this class. Yeah.
So we are featuring the GAPS class on this episode of Know Your Food with Wardee because Melanie's GAPS class is currently open and she's taking enrollments through June 20th. This class starts on June 20th. And depending on when you listen to this podcast, there may or may not be an early bird discount available, but all the information is at tradcookschool.com/GAPS class. And if you're listening to this way later, Melanie does open it up 2 to 3 times a year. So, take advantage of her 30-day prep guide, but also be on her mailing list by grabbing the 30-day prep guide so that you can be first informed when she opens up again, because you can join in the next time. And this information that she shared today is so, so valuable. It may be enough to get you a head start and get you already going. So once again, links for you, everyone, knowyourfoodpodcast.com/165 for links and transcript and video and audio and everything we've discussed today. The GAPS class itself is at tradcookschool.com/GAPS class, one word for GAPS class. The 30-day prep guide is at tradcookschool.com/30-day prep guide, all one word. So Melanie, is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Not so much, except that if you are hearing this before June 5th, there is an early bird registration price that's $50 discounted from the regular price.
Right.
So
yes,
that does end at the end of the day, June 5th.
Yeah. So hopefully people will be watching this replay before the podcast goes live. But if not, it's still a great value. So don't sweat it. If you need this information for your children, for your family to get on a new path, then
we do offer a 2-payment plan. So. Oh,
great. That's great. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for your time. You've taken time out of the conference. You've put together an amazing set of tips and lists for everyone. I really appreciate you just being so, so generous with your wisdom and your experience.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, Wardee.
Yeah, just a pleasure for me too to visit with you.
Good.
All right, everyone. We'll check out the show notes and the GAPS class, and be sure to let me or Melanie know if you need any help with GAPS or questions or anything about what's been shared today. God bless you all. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll come back again soon. Here's what you can do next. You can visit the show notes for this episode to get links and more resources about today's topic. Just visit knowyourfoodpodcast.com/ and then without a space, type in the number of today's episode. You can stop by knowyourfoodpodcast.com/watch to get 5 free traditional cooking videos from me. It's a gift. And finally, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, the podcast app, or Stitcher. If you're on a mobile device, just search for Know Your Food with Wardee right in the app. If you're on a desktop or laptop, just go to knowyourfoodpodcast.com/iTunes right in your browser. And while you're there, please leave a rating or review. I love to get your comments, and your feedback makes it much more likely that others who are interested in traditional cooking will find my podcast too. Thanks so much. God bless you, and I'll see you again soon.